When someone insults you, do you feel that familiar fire ignite in your chest? That urgent need to defend, to strike back, to prove your worth through words that cut deeper than theirs ever could? What if I told you that this very reaction, this immediate, passionate response, is exactly what keeps you powerless? What if the ancient masters knew something about insults that we've forgotten in our age of instant gratification and wounded egos? If this resonates with you, if you're ready to transform your deepest triggers into your greatest strengths, please like this video and subscribe. Your journey to psychological freedom begins now. There's a wound most of us carry, hidden beneath our carefully constructed personas. It's the wound of the insulted child, the one who learned too early that words could cut deeper than any blade. Perhaps it was a parent's careless criticism, a teacher's dismissive comment, or a peer's cruel laughter that first taught you that your worth could be diminished by another's opinion. You've carried this wound into adulthood, haven't you? It lives in that split second when someone questions your intelligence, mocks your appearance, or dismisses your dreams. In that moment, you're no longer the competent adult you've worked so hard to become. You're that vulnerable child again, scrambling to defend territory that feels perpetually under siege. Carl Jung understood this deeply when he wrote about the shadow, those parts of ourselves we've rejected or hidden away. Often, what triggers us most violently in others is what we fear most about ourselves. The insult doesn't wound us because it's untrue. It wounds us because some part of us fears it might be true. Think about your last reaction to an insult. Feel it again. That surge of heat, that desperate need to prove them wrong. Your body tensed, your mind raced through comebacks, your entire being mobilized for war. But here's what Nietzsche knew that most of us don't. He who would learn to fly one day must first learn to stand and walk and run and climb and dance. One cannot fly into flying. You cannot transcend what you haven't first understood. The pain of being insulted isn't really about the words themselves. It's about the story those words activate, the story that you're not enough, that you're vulnerable, that your value depends on others' approval. This story was written in childhood and reinforced through years of reactive patterns. But stories, as any wise storyteller knows, can be rewritten. Machiavelli observed the courts of Renaissance Italy, where a poorly managed insult could mean exile or death. He learned that those who reacted emotionally rarely retained their power, while those who responded strategically often emerged stronger than before. The prince who rushed to defend his honor at every slight soon found himself with neither honor nor kingdom. But the prince who understood the deeper game, he became legendary. Your triggers are not your weakness. They're your unhealed places crying out for attention. Every insult that makes your blood boil is showing you exactly where your power is leaking away. The question isn't how to avoid being triggered. It's how to transform those triggers into the very foundation of your unshakable strength. We live in a culture that has trained us to be reactive. From the moment we could understand language, we were taught that words have the power to define us. Good boy, bad girl, smart, stupid, beautiful, ugly. We learned to dance to the rhythm of others' opinions, measuring our worth by their approval or disapproval. Social media has weaponized this conditioning. Every post is a bid for validation, every comment a potential wound or balm. We've created a world where our self-worth fluctuates with the digital winds of strangers' opinions. Jung would call this living entirely in the persona, that mask we wear to gain acceptance, while our authentic self withers in darkness. But here's what the ancient masters understood. The person who can be controlled by insults can be controlled by anyone. Your emotional reactions have become levers that others pull to manipulate your behavior. When you react predictably to provocation, you've handed over your power to whoever is clever enough to push your buttons. Nietzsche spoke of the slave morality, the mindset that seeks to tear down rather than build up, that finds power in victimhood rather than strength. When you react to every insult, When you allow others' words to dictate your emotional state, you're participating in this very system. You're saying, yes, you have the power to determine how I feel about myself. Consider the last time someone insulted you. Did you think about their intent, their own pain, their strategic objective? Or did you simply react from that primal place of wounded ego? Most of us react from the amygdala, that ancient part of the brain designed for survival, not wisdom. We're fighting battles that don't even exist, defending against attacks that often say more about the attacker than about us. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes reality in human interactions. The leader who appears unshakable becomes unshakable. The one who seems easily rattled will be constantly tested. Your reaction to insults doesn't just affect your internal state. It signals to the world how much power you're willing to surrender. The most tragic part of our conditioning is how it keeps us trapped in patterns that guarantee our suffering. We react to insults in ways that invite more insults. We defend ourselves in ways that reveal our deepest vulnerabilities. We fight battles that strengthen our enemies and weaken ourselves. This isn't an accident. It's the predictable result of never learning the deeper game. Jung knew that what we resist persists. The more desperately we try to prove we're not what someone says we are, the more we cement that very identity in our psyche. The businessman who rages about being called incompetent is unconsciously accepting that his competence is up for debate. The woman who defends her appearance against criticism is implicitly agreeing that her worth is tied to others' aesthetic judgments. But what if there was another way? What if your triggers could become doorways rather than traps? What if the very insults that have wounded you could become the raw material for your transformation? There is a profound teaching hidden in the eye of the hurricane. Perfect stillness exists at the center of even the most violent storms. While chaos rages around it, the eye remains untouched, unmoved, magnificent in its serenity. This is where your power lies, not in the storm of reaction, but in the eye of conscious non-response. When someone insults you, they're offering you an invitation, not to a battle, but to a dance of ego and projection. They're asking you to participate in their drama, to validate their worldview, to confirm their assumptions about power and weakness. But you don't have to accept this invitation. In fact, the wisest thing you can do is to consciously decline. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who others expect you to be. It requires you to stop performing for an audience that will never be satisfied, to stop defending a self that exists only in others' opinions. The individuated person doesn't react to insults because they're not living in reaction to the world, they're living from their center. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." The person who reacts to every insult appears weak, regardless of their actual strength. The person who remains unmoved appears powerful, even if they're trembling inside. But here's the deeper truth. By choosing not to react, you actually become more powerful. Appearance and reality begin to align. Think of the masters throughout history: Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Jesus before Pilate, Socrates drinking hemlock. They faced the ultimate insults, accusations, mockery, death sentences with an equanimity that transformed not just themselves, but everyone who witnessed it. Their power didn't come from clever comebacks or righteous anger. It came from dwelling in a place that insults couldn't reach. This doesn't mean becoming passive or allowing genuine abuse. It means developing the discernment to know when engagement serves your highest good and when withdrawal preserves your energy for what truly matters. The Machiavellian leader chooses their battles not based on emotion, but on strategy. Not every insult deserves your attention, just as not every opinion deserves your consideration. Nietzsche understood that the Bermensch, the person who has transcended conventional morality, doesn't need others' validation because they've learned to validate themselves. They've moved beyond good and evil as defined by society and discovered their own values, their own meaning, their own source of strength. From this place, Insults become merely noise background static that has no power to disturb their inner symphony. When you withdraw your energy from reactive patterns, something miraculous happens. That energy doesn't disappear. It's redirected toward your actual growth, your real goals, your authentic self-expression. Every moment you don't spend defending your ego is a moment you can invest in becoming who you're meant to be. This withdrawal isn't about hiding or avoiding confrontation. It's about recognizing that your peace of mind, your emotional equilibrium, your psychic energy are too precious to be squandered on every person who feels compelled to share their unprocessed pain through insults. It's about understanding that your reaction is never about them. It's always about you, your healing, your growth, your choice. The Sacred Withdrawal teaches you something profound. You are not what others say you are, but you are absolutely what you believe yourself to be. When you stop fighting for others' good opinion, you start fighting for your own soul. There's an ancient alchemical principle that teaches us how base metals can be transformed into gold. The process requires intense heat, precise timing, and above all, the understanding that transformation happens not by fighting the elements, but by working with them. Your triggers, your wounds, your reactive patterns, these are your base metals. And the insults that once devastated you? They're the heat that can catalyze your transformation into something unbreakably golden. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, the psychological process that bridges the conscious and unconscious minds, creating something entirely new from the tension between opposing forces. When someone insults you, there's a moment of pure potential. You can react from your conditioned patterns, or you can choose to transform that energy into conscious response. This choice point is where true power is born. Consider what happens in your body when you're insulted, but choose not to react. Feel that energy rising, the heat, the tension, the urge to strike back. Instead of releasing it through reactive words or defensive posturing, you contain it. You breathe with it. You observe it with the curiosity of a scientist studying a fascinating phenomenon. This is how you begin to reclaim your power. Machiavelli understood that true strength is demonstrated not in overwhelming force, but in precise control. The prince who could destroy his enemies, but chooses restraint, commands far more respect than the one who lashes out at every provocation. Your ability to remain centered in the face of insults signals a level of self-mastery that others instinctively recognize and respect. But here's where the transformation becomes truly alchemical. As you practice conscious non-reaction, you begin to see insults differently. They're no longer attacks on your character. They're information about the person delivering them. They're windows into others' pain, fear, and unconscious patterns. They become opportunities for compassion rather than triggers for defense. Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he didn't mean that suffering automatically creates strength. He meant that conscious engagement with difficulty, the choice to extract wisdom from wounds, creates unshakable resilience. Every insult you transform through non-reaction becomes evidence of your growing mastery over your own mind. The person who has learned to be Machiavellian in the highest sense, strategic, wise, unshakable, begins to emit a different energy. There's something in their presence that discourages casual disrespect, not through intimidation or aggression, but through the quiet confidence of someone who knows their own worth and doesn't need others' confirmation of it. This transformation changes everything. Your relationships improve because you're no longer reactive. Your work performance increases because you're not wasting energy on emotional storms. Your self-respect grows because you're proving to yourself, again and again, that you can choose your responses rather than being driven by your reactions. Jung observed that we don't solve our problems, we outgrow them. As you practice this new way of being, you'll find that many of the people and situations that once triggered you simply lose their power. It's not that they've changed, you have. You've evolved beyond the frequency where those particular insults can reach you. The ultimate alchemy occurs when you realize that the very sensitivity that made you vulnerable to insults, that deep feeling nature, That awareness of others' words and energy can be transformed into your greatest gift. The person who feels deeply and also love deeply, create deeply, understand deeply. Your sensitivity becomes a superpower when it's no longer hijacked by unconscious reactions. There comes a moment in every hero's journey when they must return home, not to the place they left, but to themselves. You've traveled far from that reactive person who used to be wounded by every careless word. You've learned the difference between responding and reacting, between strength and defensiveness, between self-respect and ego protection. Now comes the most beautiful part of the journey, living from this place of unshakable inner authority. When you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone, something magical happens in your relationships. People sense that you're not performing for their approval, and paradoxically, this makes you far more magnetic than any defensive strategy ever could. Authentic confidence, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, draws others like a beacon in the darkness. Jung wrote about the process of individuation as a return to wholeness, but not the wholeness we started with. This is wholeness that includes your shadows, your wounds, your full spectrum of human experience, all of it transformed through conscious awareness. You're no longer the person who fears insults because you know, at the deepest level, who you are. Think about the person you're becoming. When someone attempts to insult you now, you might feel a brief moment of the old reaction, but then something deeper takes over. You pause. You breathe. You remember that their words are about them, not you. You choose your response from a place of wisdom rather than wounding. This is what mastery looks like, not the absence of triggers, but the conscious choice of how to engage with them. Machiavelli's true teaching wasn't about manipulation or cruelty, it was about the strategic use of power in service of higher goals. When you master your reactions to insults, you're not becoming cold or disconnected. You're becoming supremely connected to your own values, your own mission, your own sense of purpose. You're choosing to invest your energy where it can create the most meaningful impact. The beautiful irony is that as you become less reactive to insults, you often receive fewer of them. There's something in your energy field that communicates this person cannot be easily disturbed. Bullies and emotional manipulators unconsciously seek out reactive targets. When you're no longer reactive, you become invisible to their predatory instincts. But perhaps the most profound transformation is in how you relate to yourself. You're no longer your own harshest critic, no longer replaying every insult in endless mental loops. You've learned to speak to yourself with the same compassion you'd offer a beloved friend. You've become the protector of your own peace, the guardian of your own growth. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence, the idea that we should live each moment as if we'd have to repeat it forever. From this perspective, how do you want to spend your eternal moments? Reacting to the unconscious projections of others, or creating something beautiful from the center of your authentic self? You've learned that true strength isn't about winning arguments or delivering devastating comebacks. It's about the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't up for debate. It's about the serenity of someone who has found their center and refuses to be pulled away from it by others' chaos. As you continue on this path, remember that every moment of non-reaction is a moment of self-creation. Every time you choose consciousness over conditioning, you're writing a new story about who you are and what you're capable of. You're becoming the author of your own experience, rather than a character in everyone else's drama. So I leave you with this question, one that Jung himself might have asked. In a world full of people trying to pull you into their unconscious patterns, how will you choose to remain conscious? How will you use your newfound freedom from others' opinions to create a life that truly reflects your deepest values and highest aspirations? The journey from reaction to mastery is not a destination. It's a way of walking through the world. Each step you take from this centered place creates ripples that extend far beyond your individual experience. You become not just free from insults, but a teacher of freedom for others still trapped in reactive patterns. This is your invitation to step fully into your power, Not power over others, but power over yourself. Not the power to hurt, but the power to heal. Not the power to react, but the power to create. The world needs people who have learned to remain centered in chaos, who can respond rather than react, who have transformed their deepest wounds into their greatest wisdom. Your journey continues. But now you walk it as the master of your own inner kingdom, unshakable and free. Now we must venture into territory that most spiritual teachings avoid, yet Jung knew to be essential, the shadow side of power. For in learning not to react to insults, you haven't become powerless, you've become dangerously powerful. And with this power comes a responsibility that few are prepared to handle. There's a moment in your transformation when you realize something both thrilling and terrifying. You can see through people now. Their insults reveal their insecurities. Their attacks expose their fears. Their attempts to diminish you show you exactly where they feel small. This X-ray vision into human nature is intoxicating, and it's precisely where many seekers lose their way. Machiavelli warned about this in ways most readers miss. He wasn't just teaching princes how to gain power. He was teaching them how to hold it without being corrupted by it. The person who can remain unmoved by insults possesses a form of psychological authority that others instinctively recognize. But with this recognition comes temptation, the temptation to use your newfound immunity as a weapon. You might find yourself becoming cold, distant, superior. You might catch yourself looking down on those who still react, feeling a secret pleasure in your emotional invulnerability. This is the shadow of non-reactivity spiritual bypassing, disguised as wisdom, emotional numbness, masquerading as strength. Jung would call this inflated ego consciousness, and it's just another trap, albeit a more sophisticated one. The truly Machiavellian approach, in the highest sense, is to use your power in service of something greater than your own ego. When you're no longer destabilized by insults, you can see the pain behind them. You can respond to the hurt person rather than the hurtful words. This is where non-reactivity transforms from a defensive strategy into a healing presence. Nietzsche understood that the Bermensch, the person who has transcended conventional morality, doesn't become immoral, but rather discovers a higher morality. Your ability to remain centered when insulted isn't an end goal, it's a foundation for compassionate engagement with a world full of unconscious suffering. Consider this: every person who has ever insulted you was once a child who felt powerless, unworthy, or unloved. Their attacks on you are unconscious attempts to discharge their own unprocessed pain. When you can hold this perspective without losing your boundaries, you become a healing presence in their lives, not through preaching or fixing, but simply through your embodied example of unshakable self-worth. But here's the paradox that few understand. True power is demonstrated through restraint, not domination. The person who could destroy someone with words, but chooses kindness instead, commands a respect that force never could. Your non-reactivity becomes a gift to others' permission for them to lay down their weapons, to stop performing their pain, to remember their own inherent worth. This is the shadow work that spiritual bypassing avoids, integrating your capacity for both fierce boundaries and compassionate understanding. You don't become a doormat who accepts abuse in the name of enlightenment. You become someone who can distinguish between unconscious projection and genuine malice, responding appropriately to each. The mastery lies in knowing when to engage and when to withdraw, when to teach and when to simply hold space, when to show strength and when to reveal vulnerability. This discernment can only come from someone who has faced their own shadows, who has owned their own capacity for both wounding and healing. Jung observed that we cannot transcend what we haven't first integrated. Your journey through reactivity to non-reactivity has taught you something invaluable about human nature, both its beauty and its darkness. Now you must learn to dance with both, to be simultaneously compassionate and discerning, loving and boundaried, peaceful and powerful. There's a secret that mystics throughout the ages have guarded carefully. Our deepest wounds, when fully integrated, become our greatest gifts. The very sensitivity that made you vulnerable to insults, that raw, open awareness of others' words and energy, this is not something to be healed away. It's something to be transformed into wisdom. Jung spoke of the wounded healer archetype, the person who, having traveled through their own darkness, becomes capable of guiding others through theirs. Your journey from reactivity to mastery hasn't eliminated your sensitivity. It has refined it into discernment. You can still feel the impact of words, but you're no longer enslaved by that feeling. Think of it this way. A master swordsmith doesn't create the finest blade by making the metal insensitive to heat and pressure. Instead, they learn to work with the metal's natural properties, using heat and pressure as tools of transformation. Your emotional sensitivity is like that responsive metal. It's not a flaw to be eliminated, but a gift to be mastered. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be both lion and fox fierce when necessary, cunning when appropriate. In terms of handling insults, this means knowing when your sensitivity serves as valuable information about others' intentions, and when it's simply old programming that needs conscious redirection. The fox observes and adapts. The lion stands firm when boundaries are truly threatened. There will be times when someone's words reveal genuine toxicity that requires swift, decisive action. Your refined sensitivity will detect these situations long before your old reactive patterns would have. But there will also be times when someone's insult is simply their pain speaking, requiring nothing from you but compassionate non-engagement. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, love of fate, includes loving even those experiences that wounded us, because they shaped us into who we've become. Every insult that once devastated you contributed to your current strength. Every person who triggered your defensiveness was unknowingly your teacher in the art of self-mastery. This doesn't mean being grateful for abuse, but rather recognizing how your response to difficulty created your character. The sacred wound becomes sacred precisely because you've learned to extract wisdom from it rather than just carrying its pain. That childhood hurt that made you so sensitive to criticism, it also made you deeply empathetic to others' suffering. That teenage humiliation that felt so devastating, it taught you the difference between authentic self-worth and external validation. As you continue to evolve, you'll notice that your relationship with difficult people changes entirely. Those who once seemed like enemies or obstacles reveal themselves as unconscious teachers. Their insults become feedback about their internal state, rather than assessments of your worth. You begin to see the sacred function that even toxic people serve in the grand design of human evolution. They force us to become stronger, clearer, more authentic. This doesn't mean seeking out difficult people or tolerating abuse. It means recognizing that your mastery over reactivity has prepared you for a different kind of engagement with the world. You can now afford to be curious about others' behavior rather than defensive against it. You can respond to what people need rather than simply reacting to what they say. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, is not just a personal journey, but a gift to the collective unconscious. Every person who heals their reactive patterns contributes to the healing of humanity itself. Your journey from wounded reactivity to conscious response creates a template that others can follow, often without even realizing it. The ultimate teaching of your sacred wound is this: you are never broken, just temporarily disconnected from your own power. The insults that once seemed to diminish you were actually inviting you to discover resources within yourself that you didn't know existed. Your sensitivity was never a weakness. It was an untrained strength waiting for the right teacher to help it mature. Now, as you move through the world with this integrated wisdom, you become that teacher for others who are still trapped in reactive patterns. Not through preaching or advice giving, but simply through your embodied example of what it looks like to remain centered in chaos, compassionate in conflict, and unshakable in your sense of self-worth. Your journey continues, but now you walk it as both student and teacher, wounded and healer, sensitive and strong. The insults that once defined your limitations have become the very foundation of your limitless capacity for growth, understanding, and love. The path from wound to wisdom is the hero's journey of our time. You've walked it with courage, and in doing so, you've lit a torch for others still finding their way through the darkness of unconscious reactivity. If these words have touched something deep within you, if you recognize yourself in this journey of transformation, remember, your healing is never just about you. It's about everyone whose life you'll touch with your newfound freedom, everyone who will be inspired by your example of conscious living, everyone who will find permission in your presence to lay down their own defensive weapons and discover their true strength. Subscribe if you're ready to continue this journey of conscious evolution. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own unshakable worth. And most importantly, go forth and live as the master of your own inner kingdom, responding to the world from love rather than reacting from fear. Until our paths cross again in this sacred work of becoming fully human, be well, be wise, and be courageously yourself.